Alright, moving on to burns. So burns can be anything from just the top layer of skin bubbling off to really deep, to the bone kind of burns where the skin actually begins to catch fire and it melts off. So we're going to go not quite to the bone, but I'm going to give you that kind of a feeling, because you have to think, if we're doing zombies, they don't much care about anything other than where their next meal is, or how to the virus wanting to self-replicate, which means attacking another human, biting them, so on. So damage to their own individual doesn't even come into their processes, since there basically are no processes left. So they're not going to roll around and put themselves out. So they're going to burn until they go out on their own, which means that their burns are going to be pretty extensive and pretty bad. So we're going to go, yeah, that's about right. And we're going to start this by drawing a few shapes. What we're trying to keep in mind is you will have to think about what the underlying structure is underneath your burn, because as the flesh peels away, as it burns off, you may need to show bones, you may not need to show bones, but you'll almost always need to show at least partial muscle structure as the flesh peels back. It's going to expose the flesh and meat under it. So we're going to take this like it is a horribly burned forearm. So already, I mean, without even laying in any of the textures or the colors that we're going to do, I mean, we've already got a pretty decent start to the burn. And again, other things to keep in mind here are the age of your zombie. How long has he been dead? How long has he been decaying? Is he fresh? Because it does matter. If your zombie's been dead a while and he doesn't have a whole lot of internal fluids left, he's going to melt and burn much faster, and your burns are going to be much more severe. If the zombie's pretty fresh and there's still a lot of blood and still a lot of fluid in the tissue, the burns won't be quite as extensive to the point where it hinders movement per se. So just a really good thing to keep in mind as you're doing it. All right, now we start our process all over again. So we're going to take a new layer, we're going to hit it with our multiply, and we're going to do the soft round with no shape dynamics on it, just to lay in some of the initial burns, and then we knock our opacity down. And then come in here with a smaller you can, any of these that you want to really knock down and make darker, just make sure that you fill them in all the way. And we'll come back in here as well, but just a good way to start. Grab one of our splatter brushes. We'll take out any of the ones that are past where we want, because we just want some texture on the skin, and the splatter brush is just as a easy way to get a little bit more texture, which I should have done that to our bloat zombie over there, but like I said, if you want to detail it further, feel free, knock yourself out. We're going to do, what is going on there? All right, another multiply. This time we're going to bring it down in size, keep our opacity kind of dimmer, and this is where we're laying in some of the overlap, where some of the flesh is on top, some of it is burned in underneath. Pop another layer on it. do this one as our soft light. Any of the bits that are sticking up or that are still wet that you want to accentuate, this is what we're doing. Feel free to get in as close as you'd like and really make this part, this detailing phase that we do on all of these is really the fun bit of it, to really make it as gnarly as you can. And your brain is basically a difference engine. So it takes what it knows. Like if we implied that this is a forearm, it knows what a forearm looks like. And it looks for differences between what it knows and what it sees. So any of these little lines that you feel like are pretty arbitrary or just kind of, I'm laying this in here, I'm not really sure why, but it's a squiggly line. Your brain fills in the blanks and will make it, what does not belong here kind of game. And it's kind of a fun thing when you think about it. And one of the things that your brain loves is repeating patterns. So stacking lines up to imply texture, your brain eats that up and just can't get enough of it. So the more that you can stack things up to imply an idea, the more your audience will buy into what you're trying to sell them. I used to tell my students in class, when I look at your artwork, if you're drawing a piece of furniture, I want to know what that piece of furniture feels like by looking at it. If you're drawing a room, I want to know what that room smells like by looking at the picture. And that goes for anything, like these burns or your bloated zombie. I want to know by looking at that image, what does that thing smell like? How bad does that smell? What does it feel like? Is it slimy? Is it dry and crusty? And keeping in mind your backstory for that particular zombie will go a long way. Alright, not bad. Yeah, again, pop a new layer on. This is our normal layer. This is where we're going to bring in some of the super highlights. This is where we're pushing and pulling the depth of what we've already drawn. Anything that we want super high, we're sticking up, we're going to hit with a brighter highlight. I had a whole lot of guidance counselors and teachers when I was in school, elementary through high school, that seriously thought that there was something wrong with me, because I've been drawing this stuff for as long as I can remember. So I took great pleasure, of course, as any teenage boy would, in doubling down on the things that I would draw just to push the buttons. I'm sure it gave my mother plenty of headaches and sleepless nights, and I apologize for that, but I like what I do. It amuses me. Beautiful. All right, now we can take another layer on top of this. We can multiply it again. Now we can hit it again with our soft round with no shape dynamics on it. And this is just to sell the burnt I don't like that one. Bring our opacity down a little bit. All right, and then, if you want to get fancy with it, you can go back to your soft round. It does have some opacity and flow. You can do the one that has the shape dynamics as well, if you'd like. And then we're going to take our lasso tool. This guy, we'll reverse it. There. We're going to bring that opacity down. So we get a little bit of smoke, steam, whatever you'd like to call it, showing off our burns a little bit. All right, burns, awesome. Bullet holes. All right, so this one usually have a pretty wide variety of, depending on where someone gets shot. So it can be an explosive thing, or it can be a very simple puncture wound. And is it an entry or an exit is another thing that varies greatly. And what kind of round was it? Was it a hollow point? Was it a full metal jacket? Was it standard police issue 9mm? Because that will vary greatly on the type of wound it is as well. So we're going to do just a couple of really basic ones, so that you have some idea on how to represent them. So the really basic ones will generally just simply look, I need to make my layers here. Hold on. I was getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's make ourselves a folder. Bullet wounds. And we are going to add a layer to that folder. Now we can draw. So they can be a basic entry wound, can be literally a circle. This would be a pretty fast moving bullet. Like I said, a standard issue 9mm that the police carry. The thing about guns like that is the round is supersonic. Some rounds are not. They don't break the speed of sound. So depending on the distance you are from your target, when a 9mm round would hit something like a ballistics gel or a body, it would go in with a very clean entry wound, and it would zip through. I mean, it's moving faster than sound, so there really wouldn't be much distortion in the wound, other than some swelling right around the area and the blood coming out from a wound like this. So making a wound like this is pretty straightforward. Just a little bit of blotchiness. Give us our soft light layer. Multiply. Some busted blood vessels moving around it. You can even go into where you've drawn this, take your base color, give it some internals where as the bullet zipped through, the tissue expanded and then it contracted again, so you give yourself a little bit of playroom there to let it expand properly. Back to our black again. Trusty splatter brushes are always kind of useful. Just to give it some texture, you can bring it down in size for the general area. Give ourselves one more multiply layer. Go back to our standard brush. And one more layer of our normal. Just going back for our highlights. I forgot on this one, their multiply, we can bring its opacity down just a bit because we do want to see some of the detail. We don't want to cover it all up. There we go. Don't mind me, I keep noticing that I'm leaning on my left elbow and I'm probably getting out of frame, so I may end up removing the video because you're not really just seeing me sitting in a chair anyway, and sometimes I'm sure I'm bobbing in and out of frame here more than I should. All right, fairly straightforward entry wound. Now, if you're hit, let's say it's a headshot, because that's pretty much what you're aiming for on a zombie anyways. You're trying to do a pretty decent headshot, depending on the caliber and the size of the round and where it hits. I mean, you could have a much more drastic wound. So go back to our base drawing, and let's just say if you've got part of a skull here, and let's say if you're, I know this is not to scale, so don't be freaking out on me when so let's say that on your skull for your zombie, you've got a wound that's going to contact up here somewhere. But it is a glancing round, so it doesn't, maybe it doesn't penetrate, or even if it does penetrate, you may get a fracture in the bone. Okay, and what may happen is the overlaying fleshy bit perhaps got flipped back. So now we've got some damaged tissue around the front, the exposed bone, and some of the flipped back tissue. Now, depending on the caliber of round and the proximity, you could have powder burns here. This kind of an entry wound where it may have blown back some tissue here may blow a tremendous amount of tissue out, coming out the other side. And then you have to decide whether was this wound, did it happen a while ago, or is this in action in one of your sequential frames? Because if it's in action, you're going to see this in real time. You're going to get a lot of movement and a lot of cast off and spray that you may not get if it was an old wound that had happened a while ago. What you may also get is the pressure inside the head could cause the entire thing to expand rapidly, and maybe it pushes an eye out, maybe it doesn't do anything, maybe it just zips through and there's no real recourse other than that. That's up for you to decide in your image. We're really only supposed to be depicting wounds here, but I get a little carried away and want to show more. But I think without giving you a little bit of context, what I'm asking you to draw might get a little lost. So we'll just give you a little bit of context. All right, so come back up. Let's do our multiply layer. That's not the right multiply layer. Yeah, it is. All right. Lay in some of our shadows. Soft light. Again, you see how small I'm drawing this, and this specifically for, just to give you a point of reference. Generally, I say that a lot. I'm going to draw this kind of thing again as a supplement image and not as a main focal point. It's part of an action sequence generally. If they're clearing a room or they're hunting for supplies and have to dispatch a few walkers or whatever you want to call them, pinks or grays. And again, our trusty splatter brush. And then I guess I can give you one more little one here. Let's go back to, let's say possibly it's a older walker that is no longer juicy. What would that look like? Imagine it if you were to shoot a piece of leather. It would probably look very similar to that. So depending on where you did it, let's say if you've got, let's say, a pectoral muscle of a walker, you're probably going to get some maybe it's got some pitting already. Where the flesh has started to strip away. And now you're going to add a gunshot wound to that. So we'll go through our process. Grab our soft round, no shape dynamics. All right, and we'll draw our entry wound. Soft light. Let's back that up. So I'm going to add a layer for that, and I'll show you why. So we'll go multiply. So now I'm going to drop this opacity a lot, just to give our zombie some splotchy this to the skin. I just want to knock the interior of this back a little bit. And there you have it. A non-juicy hit. Alright. Disemboweled chest cavity, or cavity. So this is one of the reasons why in the anatomy section I gave you the option of doing an additional image of the internal organs. So in case you were going to do, which in all good zombie books, has at least one disemboweled zombie or person being eaten, that you have to show a body cavity. So we'll give you a quick example of one here. These can be extremely complex depending on how realistic you are going to get with your anatomy. So we're going to do a basic one here just to give you the idea of what's going on. Apologies, I have two small children that are deciding that they want to play right outside my door. A lot of pushing and pulling on my lines, messing with the shape dynamics, which I just realized I had the wrong brush equipped. So now I can do a little bit more detailed work. that far. You'll get the idea with where we're at here. All right. So I laid in, basic body cavity. So what you're looking at here is you've got the basics of the rib cage, the lateral oblique, the hip. This would be part of the abdominis erectus, the center line. This is the other hip bone that's on the other side. These squiggly bits are tissue. On the underside of a tissue, specifically around the abdominal area, you're going to have a lot of fatty tissue that's looks very splotchy, of like this yellowish kind of, and it's fat, like if you were to clean a chicken before you eat it. So there's going to be lots of really nasty fatty tissue. It's on the underside of a lot of this. So then we've got, of course, we've got to have some ooze that's, coming onto and dripping from the open cavity that has been created. Then one of the things that you'll need to decide for yourself in your cavity is, was this was what caused this some kind of an explosion? Was it the typical zombie movie where you've had a moving horde grab a hold of someone and disembowel them in a feeding frenzy? These are all things you need to decide, and it'll depend a lot on the scene that you're drawing. Intestines that are exposed and hanging from the wound, as you would expect. Somebody that's been disemboweled. That literally means your bowels are outside your body, which implies your intestines, small intestine, large intestine, and your colon is the most prevalent organs in your body cavity. So if you don't draw those, you're not going to have a believable image when you're finished. Alright, let's get started with making some sense of what's what. Alright, first thing we're going to do is create our multiply layer, drop its opacity. Let's do it about 75-76% so that we're going to start knocking back some of these deeper darks. Pushing this cavity back. We could push this whole bit back. Pop another one on top of that one. Bring in its opacity down closer to 50%. So now, every time we go over what we've done, it'll knock the layer behind it back even further. But we need to bring all of this down. We've been through this process a few times before already, so if you want to move ahead and don't want to stay with me on this and work on your own, feel free. And I would suggest download a whole bunch of these pieces, specifically like this rendering sheet, and do a lot of examples for yourself that you can use in your images later. Soft light. And again, you can feel free to add or take away as much as you'd like, depending on, again, the age, how long this cavity's been opened. There'll be a lot of decay, there'll be a lot of insects, a lot of, you name it, dirt, rancid, gross stuff. We're going to go back to our multiply. Alright, that's the right layer. Pop another multiply layer on top of that one. This one's a little less. This is 25%. Push a little bit more. Core shadow. I'll go back to my drawing for a second and remove that guy, because these are overlaying that. That's not quite enough. Alright, now you know the drill. We're up on top, we're with our normal layer, and now we're making things pop. Stacking up repeated lines, like we talked about earlier, is a great idea. It adds detail, and a lot of them are some of the details that you didn't plan on that just show up in your stacking of the lines and textures are a lot of times the best details in the entire image. I'm not sure why it is or why that works that way, but it does. All right, and here's where you get to decide whether you've done your job or not. I would suggest showing this to your wife or to someone and see if you get the, oh, that's gross. If you did, likely you've done your job. I'm going to bring that soft round with no shape dynamics in. Just on the underneath, separate this guy from the background a bit. And then on our multiply layer, you guessed it, and there you have a disemboweled body cavity. All right, And again, you can feel free, you can add the bullet wounds that we did earlier if you'd like. So let's do that for you quickly before we're done. Bullet wounds, copy group, merge group. Now I'm going to just take this guy, Control C, Control V, get rid of that guy. We'll take this guy over here. And whether he was shot before he fell or he was shot on the ground, that's up to you. So we're going to free transform this, and I'm going to rotate it. For our purposes, shrink it. Our guy was shot before he fell. And warp. So now I can make it fit a little bit better with the roundness of the pectoral muscle. And look at that. He has a bullet wound before he fell. If you want to, you can come back here. And I would recommend doing that to one of your multiply layers. Maybe there was some secondary drainage after the fact. Beautiful. All right. So now you have a completed sheet that you've done with me. What I want you to do is I want you to take a couple more of these sheets and do a few on your own. Think of what backstory you have for your walker, your zombie, your victim, and do a few of your own that you can use inside your own zombie works. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one when we start talking about coloring, and then we'll apply what we've learned to our zombie that we drew in our gestures.